Hi, Theodore here. I was doing a video on space-time when I discovered a broader perspective of the universe and our reality, which I hypothesize as the Rubik's hypothesis. But during this search, I came across something that I believe perfectly explains Mandela effect, and I call this the Stein hypothesis. There is evidence of cross-dimensionality on Earth in memory and documentation of certain past events. Mandela's passing being the most notable, but also details such as C-3PO's leg color in Star Wars, phrases from movies, as well as the Berenstein or Berenstain Bears books, which were a personal favorite of mine when I was a child. So I'm naming it in honor of the Berenstain Bears, which I remember concretely as a child being the Berenstain Bears. Welcome to the Stein hypothesis. Dilation. It's a real physical occurrence of time changing. Einstein showed that time is an illusion of velocity. When things move, the time changes. It also has something to do with gravity. When you're a satellite in space, your time changes versus those of us on Earth. So much so that there is a consistent adjustment of all of our satellites for cable and GPS. Does time dilation occur here on Earth? Einstein discovered and proved that there are two illusions of velocity. One is time and one is gravity. Time is simply a series of points perceived because of, you guessed it, we're moving. When we move, we cross points. Now, these brown lines are everything we're made out of. It's our physical energy, everything that turns into matter. Believe it or not, what Einstein demonstrated is that everything on a frequency shows up like frames in a movie, and that based on the speed of light and based on overall velocity, we perceive our existence on points. So when you change the velocity of two things with perspective, it could be a satellite or a person, you change the frequency points of where they line up with each other. Now keep in mind, if you're the satellite, your perception is steady existence. If you're the person on Earth, your perception is steady existence. However, if you take an atomic clock and go into space and float around for a while, and I stay here with my atomic clock, we are now out of phase. This is called time dilation. It's, to me, perfect evidence that we've crossed dimensionality by going out of sync with the original matter configuration and energy configuration that we're made of. While you are still existing on your point, you now line up with a slightly different me. And while I existed on my steady perceived flow of what we sense as time, I ended up being with a different version of you. The second illusion, gravity, is important. Because when we think of the Earth, and we realize that it's spinning, if you're at the top, you're spinning slower than if you're spinning at the equator. Fast. Now, initially, this would mean there's all these stripes of potential time dilation between people on Earth. But physics, as you would have it, demonstrates that this is not the case. So I got pretty excited about this time dilation idea on Earth with all these stripes starting at the equator to the North Pole and to the South Pole, where geographically there should be tons of time dilation and therefore possibly cross-dimensionality. The problem is, it centers around the other illusion caused by velocity that Einstein showed us. The second illusion of velocity that Einstein proved is that gravity actually means we're falling. Newton's theory on gravity was that there was an invisible force. Larger objects exerted this invisible force on smaller objects and brought them in. And what keeps us on the planet is this invisible force called gravity. Einstein actually taught something else, that space-time is dented by an object, and then anything smaller than what's denting the space-time falls into it. So even though my feet are firmly on the ground, I am technically falling at any given point. What physics shows about falling on the Earth is anytime you have the same gravity, or you're just as close to the center of gravity, then your falling rate is the same and actually cancels out all of this wonderful time dilation potential. Two problems with this, though, as far as ruling out the hypothesis. One is that because the Earth isn't perfectly round, gravity does change depending on where you stand. Secondly, where dilation is definitely confirmed is with altitude changes. If you're in Denver, the Mile High City, well, guess what? It's akin to being a satellite in outer space. The further you are from the center of gravity, the more dilation occurs. Certainly, on higher altitude cities would be subject to this principle. The Himalayas, for sure. And conversely, if you're in Death Valley or somewhere below sea level, then time dilation certainly occurs versus anyone on what we would consider normal, flat, sea level gravitational forces. I don't think I'm going to help you if you believe land masses are being changed and that the scientific laboratory CERN is scrubbing all of our history and doing mass devastation to how things were on a large scale. I do think I can help you if you subscribe to the strong possibility that there is a Mandela effect. Somewhat subtle, but noticeable, immeasurable, observable change in facts between memory and, at this point, things that are documented. I propose the following experiment to test the Stein hypothesis. The Stein hypothesis. If you're watching this, chances are this resonates with you and makes sense. So let's do an experiment. Send me your Mandela fact, your 2-year window of time, the earliest one that you remember this fact, city, elevation, and latitude. I'll compile the information. I'll see if there's a correlation. Then you will hear back from me. Bring it to www.theodore.life and use the comments section. Again, fact, 2-year window, city, elevation, latitude. Mine is Stein, 1977 to 1979. There's no A in my memory of this. San Jose, California, 85 feet, 37.3 degrees latitude. www.theodore.life. Let's test the Stein hypothesis and see what we find. Thank you.